My guest is Danica Patrick. She is the most successful woman in the history of American open wheel racing. She's the host of the Pretty Intense podcast, which you can find on iTunes or podcast platforms everywhere. Danica is joining us on behalf of Power Up Premium Trail Mix. You can find her on Instagram and Twitter at Danica Patrick. Danica, thanks for joining me on Sports Business Radio. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing really well. When I think of one word to describe you, I think of fearless. You were racing go-karts at age 10 against adults. You moved away at age 16 to England. I have a 16-year-old daughter, and I can't even imagine putting her on a plane to move away to another country. And then you're an entrepreneur now, which takes a lot of bravery and guts. Is fearless an accurate adjective to describe you?
No, I don't think so. I think it has more to do, because I think everyone has fear. I think it has maybe a little bit more to do with your relationship with it and your perception and your sort of understanding of fear. Like, I get scared to do things too. I mean, my first instinct is scared. Like, I get scared to do a podcast when I do them. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to look like an idiot to this person who's a legend, whoever I'm interviewing. So I mean, I get nervous. I get concerned a little here and there, of course, like anyone. But I also know that on the other side of that discomfort is growth. And it's something that's super important to me. So, and also joy, right? So like even in a race car, when you go out and you really push it, and you find the edge and you find the limit, you go faster and it's rewarding. Or you have a tough race and you get done and you feel so relieved. And so I think it's sort of, there's like a really age-old expression of finding comfort in the discomfort. And so I think that fear is a lot of discomfort. And I feel like my whole life has been spent trying to find comfort in that discomfort.
It's interesting because, again, on the surface, you would go, wow, a 10-year-old competing against adults in go-karts, moving to another country to race cars. And then I'm an entrepreneur as well. So being an entrepreneur, you've got to stare down failure in the face and say, I'm not going to fail. I'm going to succeed. So you've got to have some pretty brave, courageous traits to be able to do those things that I just mentioned.
Perhaps stubborn. Because it's not actually that you don't fail, because there's a lot of failure on the way to success. So it's not a matter of can't fail. It's a matter of I am prepared to keep failing. Right? Because it's not it's who keeps getting up and getting up and getting up. And ultimately there's information in all the losses, there's information in all the failures. And so if you can find the gems and grow from that and learn from that, then essentially you get to the point where you do start winning, or you are successful and you come out on top. So again, it's kind of like your for me, it feels like my thought process orientation with the failures, with fear, with discomfort, and just knowing that it's kind of, I guess maybe like, it's like a little bit of a roller coaster, you're kind of riding that sort of like, oh God. And then you kind of go, okay. But I guess I look at it like, cause I'm kind of visual. So I look at it kind of like a ratchet ladder where it's like, you kind of keep going up and up and up. And so I actually was just thinking about this today. I just passing thought of the fact that my life, I've said this for a long time, that my life changes in ways that I would never expect every couple of years. And that's a scary thought, because you think everything that you have is what you want. And, but I realize now that it's because I say yes to growth. I say yes to progress. I say yes to evolving. And sometimes, almost every time, it means change. And so your life is going to look different when that happens.
Where does that come from? The resilience that you have and saying yes and being able to ride the roller coaster and always bouncing back up for more challenges.
I would have said that was something that is in me and I just have it. But then I had a friend I was sitting down with her last year and we were having lunch, and she's similar and able to cope with stress. And, like, I feel super grateful that anxiety is not a part of my life. And I know that that's something that people struggle with. And um, just this sort of like super aggressive, confident, fearless uh, mindset, and this strength. Maybe strength is like just the kind of nicer, encompassing word. And she pointed out she did ballet. She was a ballerina. And she pointed out how tough that world is and how tough my world was and how early we did it, how young we were when we did it. So I guess that gave me a little bit of a new perception of my strength, because I've been practicing that and put in tough situations since I was 10. So, you know, I feel like, I think there's, somebody might have had a more softer sort of upbringing, something with maybe even more like, tenderness, coddling, even whatever, something that allows them some comfort and protection. And I think that when you're thrown in the deep end, you got to figure it out. And so I just learned how to do that really early. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for everything, all the things that have happened, all the, of course, the good, because it's easy to be grateful for the good, but all the bad too, because I feel like it's made, it's really made me into who I am. And also there's a season for everything. Like, there's a season for working, there's a season for relationships, there's a season for like being really joyful, there's a season for, just stressing about something. There's just like seasons, like there are in real life and nature, right? There's just seasons for things. And so I think that the things that I've dealt with that are tough have really served me well. And it's not a matter of sort of dismissing them or getting rid of them or not wanting them to be a part of me. It's going, okay, that season's over with and it's time for a new one.
A lot of athletes I've talked to on this show over the years, during their career, some of them get the fact that they're auditioning for their next career, right? You're building the relationships for when you're not competing anymore. Others wait till the end and they're like, okay, now I got to think about what I'm going to do next. You strike me as someone who was thinking about the next phase of your life during your racing career. Is that correct? And if so, what did you do to try and lay the groundwork for some of the things that you're doing now?
Bobby Rahal told me a long, 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 long time ago to not spend all my money, number one. And number two, he said that he always wanted to make sure that he could maintain the same kind of lifestyle after racing as he had during. And so that sort of planted the seed of other businesses and the fact that it's not really, for me, it was a little bit of a twist on it because I'm very fortunate. I did really well. But it was more a matter of using the platform when I had it to start sort of let that sort of roll into the next thing, or use that as an opportunity to show what I was doing next. And so that's kind of how I used it. But I really like doing, and I like growing, I like learning, I like helping, I like being inspiring. So really all of my businesses are rooted in some sort of form of inspiration at their core, which I've always felt like it's really important to have businesses that have long-term, like long, far out their goals, because if it's to interview someone in particular, or if it's to make X amount of money, or whatever that may be, that has an end point and a ceiling, essentially, at least in my mind. And so I like orienting the things that I'm doing around what's the right word? A mission as opposed to an end point.
I like that. I want to talk about your Pretty Intense podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I've become addicted to it. It's in my rotation now. I love the episode with Amy Lee from Evanescence.
Thank you.
Gary Vee was fantastic, fellow entrepreneur. I just think it's a deeply psychological podcast. And don't take offense to this, but while you were racing, I heard you interviewed, but I'm seeing a different side of you now and a much deeper side of you now via your podcast. And I love the conversations you have, and I find them therapeutic as well. So every time I'm done with one of your podcasts, I feel like I've learned 3 or 4 new things that I didn't know before, or that can help me in my life. And frankly, with this podcast, which I've been doing for 17 years, that's one of the things I try and do with our conversations is I want our audience to leave with a few tangible takeaways that they can apply to their life immediately. And they feel like, wow, that was worth listening to.
Yeah. The gems. It's like, I haven't just a simple saying, it's not mine, it's a Ram Dass's, but it's, we're all just walking each other home.
Mm-hmm.
And I really feel that's true. And so I'm so grateful that you said that. Thank you. I truly just enjoy people. I'm fascinated by them. Actually, if anyone asked me what I would have done if I wasn't a race car driver, many times I've said I would have been some kind of psychologist or a shrink or whatever you want to call them, a therapist. And because I'm fascinated with people as well as like figuring things out. And so helping people and like how to feel better, how to be living better and happier. And so, I do psychoanalyze my guests a little.
That's good.
But,
I do too. And I think a good podcast host is naturally curious, right? And you're trying to put yourself in the seat of your listeners.
Yeah.
So that you're hopefully asking some of the questions that your listeners would want to hear from the guest. But walk me through your process. What's Danica Patrick's process when preparing for a podcast?
Yeah. So it's kind of had a little bit of an evolution because at first, there was a little more people involved, and I've streamlined it. And partly because I found that I didn't really need as much. But now my process is, I used to get like 15 pages from a researcher, and I'd go through, and it was really good, a lot of great information. And I'd circle as I went along and write notes in the margin. And then I'd go back over all of my pages and kind of formulate like I'd pick the best topics that I was interested in. And then I would start to organize a flow for it and then write those out. And so I'd write it all out, and then I'd rewrite it again on a little note card. So by the time I've read it, organized it, wrote it once, and then wrote it again, I don't usually need it. But that was kind of the long version of how I used to prepare. Now I find that I have more trust, and tell me if you can relate to this, but there's like really listening to the words being said, so that, because there's always a question in the information that they're giving. There's naturally another level of curiosity, a layer deeper, or something, a branch off of it. So I trust that flow a little bit more than I used to. I just never wanted to get into a position with someone where I sat there and went, so what's next? Like, I mean, I just can't do, feel so bad. I feel like I try and put myself to a pretty high standard for my interviews because I've been interviewed so many times, and like, I, know what I like and don't like and know what's appropriate and not. So two rules that I just don't do in my interviews, is I don't dig into the stuff that isn't appropriate or that I know that they wouldn't want to go into. And I just try and not ask typical questions.
Right.
And so, so those are sort of my 2 general rules for myself. And now I pretty much listen to a podcast. Like if I just search their name and like Apple, like iTunes, Apple Podcasts, and
Sure.
I just go in and I find whatever they've done recently. I listen to one and I make notes. Sometimes I'll listen to another one. Sometimes I'll just Google or research some information. But generally, with one podcast, I can usually extract enough topics that I'm curious about. And it's not that I'm asking the same question that's being asked in the interview. It's that they've said something in their answer that is pertaining to how I like to do my interview. And I'm like, oh, I know they're willing to go there. And so then I kind of write that down. So there's a lot of information in a podcast as like listening to them, right? There's just so many gems. And so that's kind of how I prepare now. Sometimes I do like to always create a flow. I find that I don't usually need it, but I like to be prepared with, let's say, either like 5 topics that I can naturally transition through, or like 10 questions. And those sort of 10 questions, they're just a guide. But lots of conversations just go all over the place. But it's really like Lewis Howes told me a long time ago, based on someone that gave him advice, is he said, someone told him, he's like, what if I'm not interesting? He's like, no. He's like, you don't have to be interesting. You just have to be interested. And I was like, oh, that's so good. And so between that and listening to understand versus listening to respond is another one that is really helpful in the process. So yeah, it's come along. I look at guys like, you've been doing this for 17 years. You might be the OG of podcasts. Then you've been doing it for 17
I've
years.
been doing it a long time.
Wow. But I look at guys like, Joe Rogan and people who sit there and talk to just all kinds of different people for 2+ hours. And I'm like, that's next level kind of stuff. And so intelligent, but I don't know if you find this too, but in doing this, so many interviews, like you learn so much.
Right. And I think people want to know, you did your homework a little bit, right? So it's not the car wash, as I call it, where tell me about your book or tell me about your latest project, where anyone could ask that question. So do your homework.
Yeah.
And then I think you do a really nice job of, even if you don't know the person, like we're talking for the first time right now, we've never had a conversation before. You do a nice job of making your audience feel like you've known this person. And there's a good rapport there, because sometimes it can be an awkward conversation, but I don't get that when I listen to your interviews. Some people, I can tell that you've been friends with them for a while and you've known them and there's a friendship or a rapport there. But other people, some of the experts you've had on your show that you don't have a relationship with, it still sounds like a comfortable conversation. And that's the thing about podcasting. I used to be in radio. You got to take breaks every 10 minutes and it's very structured. And podcast conversations could go on for 90 minutes or 2 hours or however you want. And it's very conversational and free flowing and organic versus, okay, this is an interview and we have to check all these boxes during the interview. And so I just like the listening format a lot better.
It's kind of how we speak, right?
Exactly.
Podcast is basically how we speak. So you really feel like you're in the room in a conversation or sitting listening to 2 people on a couch, because it's the way that you'd speak if you were sitting around at home. And so, or, out to lunch or something like that. So yeah, the podcast world is obviously blown up, and
it has.
I'm glad, because I remember when I was promoting my book back at the beginning of 2018. And I only did a few interviews. I did Joe Rogan, I did Rich Roll, and I did Lewis Howes. I think were like the 3 podcasts I did, which are great, big podcasts.
Right.
And I had never done any. And of course, at first I'm thinking to myself, like, how long is this interview? And then after I did them, I was like, that's a lot of fun, actually. I would much rather do a couple of those a day than bounce around in and out of a car to do a 5 to 7 minute segment in a studio. So yeah, I think that I'm so glad that people are resonating with the long format, because, it's just so much deeper and more informational. And I love that there's a hunger out of people that they are wanting that, because to me, it tells it's growth. It's that you're able to keep your attention on something for an extended period of time, and also like really learning and getting into a conversation. So I'm glad.
Well, I binged your podcast in preparation for this
Oh,
conversation. And then I'll tell you, I listened to one of my favorite podcasts that I've listened to in a long time. You and your sister on sibling revelry with
oh,
Oliver and Kate Hudson.
yeah.
Because I have siblings as well. And I always think, like, what would it be like if I did a podcast with them, with my siblings? And, I learn a lot about you. And like I said at the beginning of this conversation, I feel like via your podcast, I've learned more about you and just listening to those than I did during your career. And it's not any offense about, but like you said, you would do 5 to 7 minute interviews, you do quick radio hits. It wasn't a deeper conversation. So kudos with the Pretty Intense podcast. I think it's fantastic. I'm always anxious for the next episode to come out to listen to it. And there's a lot of people that have tried podcasting post career. I'll be honest with you, some of them do a good job and some don't do a great job. I think you do an outstanding job. So,
Oh man, that's really cool of you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll keep doing a couple more episodes. I'm interviewing Alanis Morissette on Wednesday. And
oh,
so
wow.
I'm excited for that just because she's been always like an all-time favorite of mine. But I've been lucky enough to interview some really cool people. So you know what it's like. It's like, who am I talking to? You're like,
Right.
this is so cool.
Yeah, it is cool. Cause again, being curious and just wanting to be curious about talking to that person, I think is great. I saw Alanis Morissette's first arena show. I live in Portland, Oregon. So
Mhm.
she did her first arena show in Portland. And it was really funny because, she's just like this badass woman and has all this energy. But before the show, she's like walking around backstage with a teddy bear and she was really quiet. And then she gets on stage and it's just electric. And you're like, oh my God, she's so quiet in her normal life. But on stage, she's just like this power player. It was cool to see. But
That
I
had to
think
been back in the like Jagged Little Pill days
it
then, right?
was. It was 1995. It was her very first arena show.
Yeah, that's so
So
cool.
yeah, she's done a lot since then. Well, congrats on
Portland's
that.
had a lot of great music come through.
Yeah, Portland has had a lot of great music come through, and a lot of people like start, kind of in this area and in Seattle. So
Yeah.
kind of interesting. All right, I want to talk about some of the other things that you're doing. You are a wine connoisseur. And that's not an easy business either. And you've got to be brave to get into that business because it's competitive. And, a lot of people can just stick their name on a label, but you've really been involved in your wine brand. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, there's two now. So it started off with Somnium, which means dream in Latin.
Right.
And it's because I was in Napa Valley drinking, swirling some white wine at 10 a.m. because you can. And I thought, man, it'd be so cool to have like something like this someday. And that's why I called it Somnium, because it was just a dream at that point. Like it was just an idea. And so it's really cool to look at these projects and think, oh my God, that was just an idea. Like that's all it was in my
Mm-hmm.
head. And um, so I bought the property in 2009 and planted the vineyard and started from scratch. And so that finally, a bottle was finally for sale in 2017. The 14 vintage was for sale in 2017. So that was a long project.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is it really led into the next one, which was one that launched last year called Danica Rosé.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a grown and made in Provence, France rosé. Man, we've had a really cool promotion that keeps getting put off every year. We were supposed to launch, well, over a year ago at Monaco at the
Oh,
Grand Prix
wow.
with
Wow.
the yacht and the whole thing. And then it was supposed to be this year, and then that got canceled again. And but anyway, it's been a really cool project. So I've got really good partners with that one. And so that's growing really fast. So yeah, I mean, people ask me, why are you in the wine business? And my answer is really simple. And that's just that I like to drink it.
When someone comes to you with an idea for a partnership or an endorsement, or when you're thinking about starting a wine company, what are the elements that you need to see in order to say, you know what, yeah, I'll sign on the dotted line and I'll be your partner or I'll start this business?
Well, the first one I've spent it's all my own money and I've spent a lot of it. And so it's a long game project.
Hmm.
It's passion. Really the core of it is like getting back to like, there's a dot on the top and it's like a "you are here," like in a hotel room or somewhere, like marking the spot. And it's sort of a trigger to hopefully get you to read the back label and then remember, because it's in the back label, but to be present. And so really the message and the feeling is to be present with the company you're with and share and really connect with the people around you. And so, you know, that is really, that was my baby. And then the Danica Rosé project was a few guys that got together that were, you know, they were interested in making wine. And so we decided making some rosé. And as far as me being involved, it's like, I couldn't think of a more authentic thing to do than make rosé in France. Like, it's the hometown of Provence is where rosé, it's like the birthplace of rosé. So, you know, I just think that for me is so parallel with me as a brand, just being authentic. So that was, you know, but we're all partners. We're all equal partners, and we put in the effort. And I mean, I feel like, you know, maybe some put in more than others, like the guy who's out there, you know, getting it sold and everything. But we all play our part, you know, a critical part. So I guess, you know, when it comes to making a decision what to do, it's like, it's all roots and sort of passion and curiosity and interest. Like, are you really actually into it? And then do you feel like you have a good team around you?
Power Up Premium Trail Mix. They're a partner of ours. I know you're one of their endorsers. What led to you wanting to work with them? I love their trail mix. And frankly, I didn't know the difference between premium trail mix, the really healthy stuff, and the stuff filled with candy until I started eating their trail mix.
Yeah. Well, I remember hearing just how the nuts are even prepared. Like the fruits and the nuts, just there's different, just like with anything, like there's a doctor that went to, you know, where do doctors go to?
Medical school?
Harvard? No, that's law. Princeton, Yale, something
Yeah,
like that. Whatever.
right,
There's those doctors, and then there's doctors that come out of somewhere that you've never heard of, and
right,
yet they're all doctors, right? And so it's
right.
like with trail mixes, it's like there's ones that come out of, you know, the top echelon sort of productivity and processes, and then there's ones that are not as good, and or maybe you wouldn't know about them. They're smaller. And so actually usually the problem is they're bigger sometimes. But I feel like when I heard about just how the high quality process that was used for the trail mixes, I was like, wow, I had no idea. And since health is so important to me, I was like, this is a really great company and total alignment with my core values. And then just use, like, truly eating them and using it and grabbing the little to-go bags when I'm traveling. And shoot, at Thanksgiving or Christmas, I made, like, you know, almond bark bars, like white chocolate almond bark bars with one of the trail mixes. So I just really, I'm fortunate enough in my career where I don't have to align with people that aren't in alignment with me and my values. So Power Up is a really easy decision.
Are you a cook? Do you like to cook? And you
Yeah,
just,
I love
wow.
it.
Do you have a good setup for your kitchen and everything? And
Oh yeah.
what's your
Yeah.
go-to? What's the go-to Danica Patrick? If you have company coming over, family, friends, whoever, and you're going to make your best thing, what is it going to be?
I don't know. I mean, I guess, you know, to be honest, I do make a pretty good steak. I know that
Ooh,
sounds really silly. I don't usually go out to eat for stuff like that because I can make it so well.
yeah.
But I mean, probably like just something simple. I also follow a pretty much paleo diet. So I mean, that limits a lot of things. But I mean, I'll make like steaks and salmon and some roasted vegetables and some kind of potato of some sort, maybe roast those too, or shoot, you can like wedge up sweet potato, put it on the grill. I mean, that works too. I mean, there's just, I cook really simply, but it ends up being a lot about texture and food and flavor combinations.
I follow you on social media. We said earlier, Danica Patrick on Instagram and Twitter. Some of your workouts that you do, my God, like your core. I ride the Peloton
Oh,
and you know I hike and things like that. But I'm watching some of your workouts and they're next level. So I'm impressed.
thank you. Well, you know, I do like, I love fitness. I love working out. Like I truly just like it. Like I get excited to work out. And as soon as I write down a workout, it happens. It's like an automatic manifestation technique in the gym. Like just write down the workout and go. But here's where most people get stuck. They don't know how to write a workout. And so but I started doing CrossFit, which I just really love and enjoy. Probably back in 2013. And I don't do pure CrossFit, but I do a lot of CrossFit. And I just think it really gives you good tools to not only show how to build a workout, but also and there's also so many resources for that too: websites, programs, Instagram accounts. But also it shows you what real working out is, and it should hurt and it's painful, and you get really, you don't just get out of breath, you're like laying on the ground when you're done. So I like that.
I mean, can you please tell our audience once and for all, and I think most people know this, but being in a race car like you were, you have to be in incredible condition and your core has to be so strong because you're in that car for hours and you're going so fast. Like it really does take, you have to be in incredible shape.
Mm. Well, yeah, I mean, most people, I mean, there's definitely other sports that peak in other ways, but
Sure.
to keep your focus, I think that one of the things that we like overlook in general is just the mental capacity and the focus. And whenever the body starts to distract through pain or fatigue or discomfort, you're pulling from the mental side of things. So there's probably very few sports that actually have to keep you you have where you have to stay focused for 4 hours.
Right.
I mean, even under caution, you're saving fuel and doing all kinds of things. You're making pit stops, so there's really not a lot of time to relax. So no timeouts. So I think that I just it's really important to be hydrated, really important to have good focus. It's really important to have upper body strength, neck. I mean, yeah, actually, this is funny. I went skiing for the very first time about a month ago,
Okay.
and I was going down the hill and it was like a tough blue. And I was like, it was like, I had taken 2 lessons, and then day 3 was like, have at it. And, so I'm going down and I just yard sail it. Like I just fly off the handlebars and
Yard salad. I love that term.
yard sail it down the mountain. And my head like whipped back really hard.
Ooh.
And I woke up the next day and I was like, oh man, I haven't had neck pain like this since I went to Sebring for the first test of the year in an IndyCar every year. Because it seems like in IndyCar, we'd always go to Sebring or somewhere like that in Florida, and go, get in a car for the first time of the season. And the acceleration and deceleration and lateral loads not so bad because you have head surround, but like vertical, like forward and backwards under braking and acceleration, like your neck would, remember what it had to do again, and it'd be painful. So it took a skiing accident for me to remember just like what it took for neck strength. But yeah, there's lots of little things with driving that you need to be really strong and have a lot of endurance for.
Before I let you go, I see by following you on social, you're doing some traveling and some adventures and trying things like skiing for the first time. What's next for you, whether it's business wise or just what lies ahead? Because, it seems like you're in such a great position right now. You've got this blank canvas and you can paint it however you want.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, there's a lot of new stuff going on. I mean, the podcast isn't that old, so this summer will be 2 years, but still doing that and enjoying it. And the new wine that launched last year, Danica Rosé, as well as Somnium. Then there's some other projects in the works. I think that getting into, I'd really like to try to transition some of the techniques that I've learned through interviewing people into maybe doing specials with athlete. I think pairing me with athletes is a good thing. I mean, it could go with anything, as I actually interview mostly not athletes on the show. But I think it's a good way to retap that audience that followed for so long, and also then be able to use some new skills. So doing like special features and things like that around big events, I think would be really cool. But then, there's a show in the works that's based on, women and the things that they've accomplished and me hosting that. So that's in the works right now. So yeah, there's always something going on.
Danica Patrick, you can find her on Twitter and Instagram at Danica Patrick. She's joining us on behalf of Power Up Premium Trail Mix. Make sure to listen to her podcast, Pretty Intense, on iTunes and podcast platforms everywhere. Danica, it's been a pleasure. Continued success to you. And thanks for joining me on Sports Business Radio.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for being so prepared. I appreciate it.
You're listening to Sports Business Radio. We'll be right back.